Good morning and Happy New Year to you all. Welcome to our first webinar of 2024, and one which we hope you'll find of interest and perhaps help your business, whether that's now or provide you with some thoughts for planning for the future. And we're going to be looking at apprenticeships and how they can be just one solution to your recruitment challenges. Before we start, we do like to introduce ourselves. So we're going to be supported by Hannah Wallace, our marketing manager, who'll be on hand to help with any technical issues. Touch wood, we won't have any, but if you do encounter any issues and you're able to still communicate with us through the GoToWebinar system, then please do send a message and we'll look into those. I'm Victoria Templeton, the HR Knowledge Manager, and I'm supported by Sue Watson, our Operations Director. And together we'll take you through the webinar and take your questions and run the polls as well. And because we've got lots of you who have joined us today, we've had to place you all on mute. However, we do want to hear your questions as usual. So when you see this slide, it means that we're at the end of the webinar and we're ready to take your live questions. So I'm just going to quickly run through how you can submit your questions to us. So on the screen now, you'll see an image of what your GoToWebinar panel looks like, and you simply type in your question in that question pane. And then, as I said, we'll aim to read out and answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. So when we see this slide, for those of you who regularly join us, it's poll time. And what that means is we're going to run a confidential poll where we see your input to the relevant topic that we're talking about. So they do really help in the running of the webinar. It's really helpful for everybody that's in attendance to just get a feel for what other organisations may be doing, other viewpoints, opinions. And so we've got several of those in this morning's webinar. And so when you see this slide, that's when we're going to run them. All we say is that if you would like to participate, then just make sure you're not in the full screen mode, sorry, in GoToWebinar, because for some reason they don't work in the full screen mode. So I'm now just going to quickly whiz through the agenda. And as I said, it's about looking at apprenticeships and how they can be just one solution to your recruitment challenges. So the important thing to say at the outset is the content that I'm going to talk you through relates to apprenticeships that are operated in England. There are different rules and setups for apprenticeships that are managed in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. So today is purely looking at those operating in England. So we're going to first start off looking at the benefits of apprenticeships and how they can help you address your recruitment challenges. We're going to explore the different types of apprenticeships that are available and provide an overview of how to find and recruit an apprentice and what the government funding is available to businesses. And then we'll take your questions and answers at the end. Just to let everybody know, a copy of today's slides will be sent out along with a recording of this webinar in the coming days. So don't feel like you have to be scribbling down lots and lots. A copy of the slides will be sent out. So let's begin, and I think the first thing I just wanted to share is that we actually have National Apprenticeship Week coming up between the 5th and 11th of February. So do check out the government website after today's webinar to find out more, and I do have some information right at the end of the webinar that details more about that and some other sources of help. And the other thing to say is when we also think of apprentices, many people assume young workers make up apprenticeships, but actually anyone of any age can complete an apprenticeship. We also, if we think about the last few years, in actual fact, young workers have been affected the most in terms of employment, skills development, and that's because of the pandemic. So apprenticeships are actually a really good, beneficial tool for organisations, but also to benefit the employee, which we'll come on to talk about. And I hope today's webinar does shine the light on apprenticeships, because actually from my own personal experience, you know, I know firsthand how beneficial and important they are for both employers and workers. And as I say, from personal experience, I started out my HR career as an apprentice, so I just thought I'd give you sort of a run through and to sort of illustrate how beneficial they are. So I undertook an apprenticeship at the age of 19, which incorporated an MVQ in business administration, and I was employed within a HR department and in that role, I was undertaking basic entry administration work, HR related. I successfully completed the apprenticeship and achieved the MVQ, and I was actually offered permanent employment in that HR function at that organisation. And my employer actually continued to support my own personal continued development. They funded my attendance at university to complete my professional qualifications. So then I spent a further 3-4 years undertaking my CIPD, which is a Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, all whilst I was working for them. And whilst I was employed with them, I progressed across the HR function. I undertook various roles, and I was with them for 7 years. So that covered HR administration, systems, international HR admin, eventually then becoming my first entry role into HR advisory. But for me personally, there came a time when I couldn't build on my experience and skills at that point, and I needed to gain my advisory skills out elsewhere. So that's where I then went into new employment, and I continued my HR career, both in large and small organisations, in-house and outsourcing as well, in all areas of HR. So for me personally, I'm a real strong advocate for apprenticeships. I personally have felt the benefits and experienced the benefits, and if I think about those 7 years I had with my employer, they were able to develop my skill set throughout those 7 years and to utilise my skills in a variety of functions within their HR team. So that's just a bit of a personal note, just to sort of kick off apprenticeships. And I think now would be a good time just to sort of run a few polls just to see what everybody is undertaking in terms of apprenticeships, etc. So Sue, we've got the first poll, and it's really just out of interest, if any of you on this webinar today, are you an apprentice, or actually did you start your own career as an apprentice like I did all those years ago?
Okay, I'll
close
that poll and share the results.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow. Yeah. And it probably doesn't come that much of a surprise. I kind of thought there would be more no, definitely. I don't know about you, Sue. I think it's probably an area of resourcing that perhaps doesn't get much thought or consideration. And it's interesting to probably find out why that is. And I think we may have a poll coming up around that. But I don't know what you think, Sue, around that. Does that seem to be expected?
I would say so, although I'm not sure I was expecting quite as high a distinction, but yeah, absolutely. Okay, shall we ask a few more questions then around, because I think
so our second poll is more about sort of focusing on the recruitment side of at the moment, and what's your biggest challenge when it comes to talent, and whether it's the recruitment, retaining it, etc. This is a broad general talent question.
Then we move back into apprentices, don't we? So I'll close that poll and share those results. There we go. So the biggest one is recruiting, which is common challenge for all of us, I think.
Yeah, and it's been like that really over the last couple of years, hasn't it? I think since the pandemic and coming out of that. Okay, and it probably doesn't come as a surprise then. And the competition for talent, that's 19%. Yeah.
And that's having to kind of consider your reward packages and the impact that has on existing staff, and trying to attract people, and then retaining the talent you already have if you're having to offer more to get people into the business. So yeah, all of that is a common challenge. Okay, shall I?
Yeah. And the next one, and it's whether you currently employ apprenticeships in your organisation.
Oh,
this is an interesting one.
That one's, yeah. It was neck and neck for a while. Okay, I'll close that
It's
poll
rare
and
that
share the
happens.
results. It was literally 50% for quite a long
Yeah.
time. Then the last few votes came in, and it just slightly edged ahead.
So yeah, good proportion of you actually.
Okay.
Just under half of you employ apprenticeships. So that's good to hear. And for those of you that don't, then perhaps this webinar may give you some things to think about, and who knows what may happen in the future then within your organisation.
Okay, and we've got one last one, haven't we, at this stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I launch that, it's just if you're considering at this point in time, are you considering taking on an apprentice in 2024? Okay, I'll close that.
Good statistics
Share
there.
that.
Yeah, so just over half of you, yeah, we're thinking of employing an apprenticeship. So that's great news and great to hear. And for those of you that aren't sure or even know that you're not, then perhaps at least, you know, you may gain some valuable information from today that perhaps you can have a think for the future.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. So let's get back. And what we're going to look at now is the benefits of hiring apprenticeships. Because ultimately understanding these will help you identify how you can overcome those recruitment challenges that we've just sort of spotted in our polls. So first of all, they can provide a pipeline of fresh talent, and ultimately you can mould the individual to fit your company's specific needs. So it's a real great opportunity to have that job role and create the, you know, mold that person to fit your company needs. So it really is like growing your own skilled workforce. They also can contribute to a more diverse and inclusive workplace, because by offering opportunities to individuals who might not have pursued a traditional academic path, the diversity can bring different perspectives and creative solutions to your team. And plus it means that you're able to tap into that broader pool of talent. They can enhance employee loyalty, because apprentices who have been nurtured within the company often feel that strong sense of loyalty and commitment. And so investing in their development means that you gain that dedicated and skilled employee. And in turn, that means you get that engaged and motivated employee, and therefore who will become more productive, contributing to the business success. There's also financial incentives for organisations to support in hiring apprenticeships from the government, which we'll come on to later. You know, so the government do support and offset the cost of training and development, so it makes it a cost-effective way to build that skilled workforce. And employing apprentices can really have a positive impact on your employer brand, locally and nationally if you operate nationally. But ultimately today, what we're focusing on is really how apprenticeships can be a solution to those recruitment challenges that we have all experienced over the last few years that we've just touched on a moment ago. But what about the benefits to the from the employee's perspective? So, you know, it's about providing many benefits for the individual, where it can positively impact on their engagement and motivation. It can provide that valuable hands-on experience that is in a real work environment. This practical experience is often more relevant and directly applicable than the theoretical knowledge that they gain in a classroom. Apprenticeships offer a structured training programme, allowing individuals to acquire specific skills related to their job role, and that targeted development enhances expertise and makes them more competitive in the job market as well. Apprenticeships often come with mentorship opportunities, and having a mentor within the organisation can provide that guidance, support, and is a real valuable connection for career development. Completing an apprenticeship can open doors to long-term career opportunities within the organisation. As you know, you heard me talk through my journey and undertaking several roles in the time that I was with my organisation. And many employers prioritise promoting from within. So apprenticeships are really a great way for individuals to start climbing their career ladder. And being part of a company through an apprenticeship exposes individuals to a professional network as well. So building connections within the industry can be instrumental in future career growth and those job opportunities. And successfully completing an apprenticeship can boost an individual's confidence. The combination of that practical skills and work experience along with the mentorship can make them feel more prepared and capable in their chosen field. But let's think about how they can then be a solution to recruitment challenges. And really, I just wanted to sort of highlight to you some research that we carried out mid to late last year, where we wanted to understand more about how businesses were dealing with recruitment. And we found that 80% of respondents reported that they continued to have recruitment challenges. The biggest challenge facing employers, was the skill shortages. That came up at 43%. But we also found that candidate shortage and pay was another factor, with 24% reporting a lack of candidates and 23% unable to meet the wage demands of candidates. It was also reported that the time it takes to hire is a challenge, and 15% of the respondents indicated that struggling to recruit efficiently was one of their recruitment challenges, and with cost per hire also being an issue at the 7%. So there are many, there's a lot of statistics and research out there, but our own research that we carried out, it was telling us that there are many recruitment challenges, and these are the kind of challenges that employers were facing. And we did undertake further separate research not long after, and this was specifically more about the skills and development needs within organisations, and we found that 89% of our respondents struggled to have the right skill set to be able to respond not just to the current business challenges, but future ones as well. We also found that 26% said that they had the inability to retain skill and talent. That was one of their biggest challenges as well. And finally, 67% didn't have a plan for the future in terms of how they employ managers of the future, but instead they would take an approach of recruiting managers at the time the vacancy arose, at the time was needed. There was no future planning of talent. So we know from organisations that we've spoken to and reached out to that recruitment challenges do exist. Even on our poll earlier suggests, it is still a challenge. And when we delve into it, these are the kind of areas that we're seeing where the challenges lie. So when we think about how an apprenticeship can be a solution to recruitment challenges, are having difficulty in attracting candidates or even retaining, having that strong employer brand in general is really, really important for the management and employing of people. So these are the benefits that apprenticeships can bring, and actually can help offset those recruitment challenges that we've spoken about and what we're seeing here in our results. So I'm now going to look at the different types of apprenticeships and sort of just at high level go through the approach to take in finding them and recruiting them before we then look at the government funding and take your questions. So before I start going through the approach about employing one, there are several different types of apprenticeships that can be employed into your organisation. And as I said at the outset, remember, apprenticeships aren't just for young people, fresh out college, university or school. They are available to anybody of any age. And that's really important to remember. But as you can see here, there are 4 different levels. You've got the intermediate, advanced, higher and degree level. Now, depending on what it is that you're needing in your organisation from a skill set point of view, what the job is requiring will obviously dictate which level of apprenticeship best meets the needs of the business. So as you can see here, your intermediate is generally equivalent to your GCSE level, advanced equivalent to the A level, And then you've got your apprenticeships that are equivalent to a foundation degree, bachelor's or master's degree. So actually, they're not just aimed at individuals just leaving school age, looking for a GCSE equivalent. You know, they can progress into more technical training schemes at higher level. So they're the 4 levels that we have. And so the important thing is when we start looking at how you approach managing and introducing apprenticeships into your scheme, the first thing is really understanding the skill gap in your organisation. And this comes about hopefully naturally if you're already carrying out things like your training needs analysis, or if you're already doing your strategic people planning, because then you're aware of exactly where the gaps are across your organisation, and therefore of those gaps, which ones have the potential to be filled by the hiring of an apprentice. And clearly these 2 activities, like your training needs analysis and your strategic people planning, need to align with your business goals. So like I've said a moment ago, the key business activity is things like your strategic people planning, resource planning and your training needs analysis. We then need to think about how you find the most suitable apprenticeship course. So you've identified the skill gap in your organisation, and then you need to find that suitable course. So when you have done that, then when you are looking at the level of course you need and the type, then just make sure that you're selecting the right training to suit your business and the job role. Think about the level of the apprenticeship that you're going to need to be able to fulfill that that skill gap that you're trying to fill, and the duration of the training. When you come on to find a provider, it's about discussing expectations with the training provider so that you know that you're going to get the most out of them, and the apprentice will get as much as they can out of the placement. And when you're working with a training provider, ensure your agreed training plan is flexible and can be changed to meet the needs of the business and the apprentice. Now, there are many, I've got lots of sources of information at the end of the webinar where I'll direct you to where you can find training courses, training providers, etc. So once you've identified a training course, you need to then find the best training provider who will provide the apprentice with the best off-the-job training. So the training provider will be responsible for 20% off-the-job training, and the provider can be local or national because many will provide training either online or face-to-face in person. And you can use the government's Find the Apprenticeship training service, which will enable you to find the course at the right level and that provides the right skill. And you can also check through the government online service availability of training providers, as well as reading reviews posted from other employers as well. So there is a very clear structured framework in place for organisations to help them in finding apprenticeships and, you know, obviously the course and the training provider. Once you've decided on the type of apprenticeship your business needs and the chosen training provider, you'll need to create that apprenticeship service account. All apprenticeships in England must be managed through this government account, but what essentially it will do is allow you to access and manage funding. You can receive a transfer of funds through it. You can advertise vacancies. You can choose the course and the provider through the system, and you can also give permission to training providers to carry out some tasks on your behalf, so that when it comes to managing and administrating the apprentice scheme, they can be responsible for some of the activities. So once you've found both the apprenticeship course and training provider, it's about recruiting that apprentice and using that fair recruitment process. So you can either manage the recruitment process yourself, or you can ask the training provider to do so. You must ensure that there's a fair process that's adopted, just as you would with any other vacancy in your organisation. And there are many ways in which you can recruit apprentices. It could be the training provider, like I said, recruits on your behalf. You can build contacts with local schools and colleges so they can then introduce your organisation to their students. And of course, you've got things like LinkedIn, where you've got networks that you can communicate and link up with. But the important thing is when you're recruiting an apprentice is that any assessment method that you then deploy for determining who's going to take up the role must be fair, transparent and appropriate for the situation. And then once you've recruited an apprentice, by law, they must be provided with an approved English apprenticeship agreement, setting out the terms and conditions. And I touched on it at the start that this is about apprenticeships in England. So you just need to be mindful that obviously there needs to be other terms and conditions relevant to the other nations of the UK. And by law, as I said, the apprentice must be provided with this agreement, and apprentices have the same employment rights as other employees. So that means in regards to your working hours, rest breaks, to be paid the national minimum wage, the apprentice rate, and must be paid, must be at least 12 months in duration. So it is really a contract of employment in place for that duration of that apprentice scheme. And then the apprentice begins, and it's about looking at the initial stages of employing that apprentice. And at the outset, the employer really needs to get involved in what's known as an initial assessment, where the training provider, the apprentice and the employer all sit down. And that initial assessment is about identifying whether the individual is already competent in any areas of the apprenticeship occupation standards. And if they are, then they don't need to necessarily undertake those elements of the training. So it's really establishing, you know, the occupational standards for that training course, the current skill set of that individual, and which aspects of the training course don't necessarily need to be undertaken because they already hold those skill set. And then throughout the apprenticeship, on-the-job training must be provided to support that overall training, and that can include having that comprehensive induction program, having a mentor in place for the individual, operating regular one-to-ones, creating networking opportunities, holding regular performance reviews, but also importantly is thinking about their mental health and well-being support. You know, if you think about young workers perhaps just leaving school, starting an apprentice, the world of work is completely new. It's probably daunting for them going into the world of work and having to start doing work. So it's really important to think about actually the mental health and well-being of the apprentice as well. And then it's around how your apprentice is successful, and making sure that they're obviously supported throughout their apprenticeship scheme. And so for employers, given the time and effort that's been invested in the learning, consider what comes next for the individual. So it could be to offer them a position within the organisation, and make their employment permanent. It could be to offer them a promotion in the organisation, or it could be to continue with further formal development and place them on a higher level of apprenticeship. Ultimately, you hope that you can retain the talent that you've grown so that you can reap the many benefits of employing apprenticeships. And the last thing to consider on this is around the endpoint assessment, that needs to take place. So it has to be completed because it demonstrates what the individual has learned through their apprenticeship scheme. The endpoint organisation must be independent from the training provider, and it's really important to find a provider early on in the apprenticeship to give you and the apprentice enough time to prepare for the assessment. So in terms of the completion of the apprenticeship, it is about what next. And as I've just said a moment ago, it's about whether you can offer them a promotion, a higher level of apprenticeship, or, you know, offering them a permanent position in your organisation. But now I'm going to just look on the government funding. Sorry, I've just got, my slides were mixed up there. So the government funding, just to clarify, only employers with a pay bill of over 3 million must pay the apprentice level. So for instance, only employers with, so where the pay bill isn't over that 3 million, then all other employees generally pay 5% towards the cost of training and assessing an apprenticeship, with the government funding the rest. So the employer pays the training provider directly, agrees the payment schedule. The government's contribution is up to a funding band maximum, and so any additional costs must be met by the employer. However, the government will pay 100% of the apprenticeship training costs up to the funding band maximum when they employ fewer than 50 employees, or when and the apprentice is aged between 16 to 18, or in the case of individuals with an educational health and care plan provided by a local authority, it's between the ages of 16 to 18. That's when the government will pay 100% of the apprentice training costs. Otherwise, it's the generally the employers pay 5%. Additionally, employers and training providers could be eligible to receive £1,000 from the government for each apprentice that they hire, who is either aged between 16 to 18 or between 19 to 24, again, if the circumstances are where they're on a care plan that's provided by the local authority or has been in the care of the local authority. And the additional funding can be used on any costs associated with supporting the apprenticeship in the workplace. So it can be for travel, salary, uniforms, and the employer doesn't need to do anything to receive the payment, as the training provider confirms who is eligible to the government. The £1,000 is paid in 2 instalments. So the first £500 is paid after 90 days of the apprentice starting date, and then the final £500 is paid after 365 days of the apprenticeship starting date. So there's a lot of information out there, and I'm going to run through a couple of slides. So first of all, for anybody on the webinar who has access to our HR knowledge base, that's our platform where we provide lots of templates and articles and guidance. I've highlighted here, and when you get a copy of the slides, you'll have the links. But you've got lots of templates. So you've got a template apprenticeship agreement, you have training needs analysis forms, training authorization forms, and training development policy. But in terms of guidance and further information on the subject of apprentices, then there are dedicated articles as I've listed here. So we do have an apprentice article. We've got the hot topic that accompanies this webinar. And then we've got some other interesting, helpful articles as well about creating job descriptions, job adverts, everything that you need that will help in the process of recruiting an apprentice, and hopefully that will take a lot of the extra admin work out from you if you are considering moving an apprentice, moving to employing an apprentice, because we've got all the templates there available to help you. In general, the information that's available for everybody from the government, you've got various links, and again these will be on the slides when they get sent out to you. You can go through the government website to find an apprenticeship training course and look at what's available. You can check an Ofsted report when you're researching training providers. There's a link here to how you create an apprenticeship service account, which is mandatory if you're hiring apprenticeships. There's also a link to how you can create an apprenticeship advert within this service account, how you can find an endpoint assessment organisation, and there's lots of details as well that I've directed you to on the slides for the National Apprentice Week. And the National Apprenticeship Week, as I said, is between the 5th and 11th of February, and they have a clear schedule as to how they're approaching the topics. So do check out their website for more information. But as you can see here, they've got things planned for every day of the week. So before we get on to taking your questions, I'm just going to run a couple of the previous polls just to see what they come out like now. the first one. Yeah.
It's now you know more about all of this after Victoria's really informative update. Do you think that apprenticeships might help your recruitment challenges? Okay, we will close that and share those results. So,
oh wow,
a huge 97%, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, shall we ask the next
Yeah,
one?
that's really interesting. Thank you.
And then,
poll is,
if you said no earlier, would you reconsider employing apprentices? Okay, I will close that one. Share those results.
So yes.
Yeah, so there has
Brilliant.
been a turn.
Yeah.
Still not sure, but it's absolutely understandable. It's not an easy it's not easy to do. It's not easy. There are some challenges, but it is well worthwhile. That you know that it can't be taken lightly, the decision, because there's quite a lot you have to do, isn't there, to be able to sustain it and to maintain the support.
Exactly, and I think if you've come from a place where you've never hired apprentices at all, then yeah, the groundwork is going to be key and fundamental and will take time and effort in establishing because it's all new. Once you've sort of done that, and I guess you can plan for it, maybe it might be that you plan for next year onwards you start using apprenticeships. It doesn't have to be now. But once you've got an apprenticeship in place and you've got into the motion of managing it, using the government systems, working with providers, you know, it should then become easier once you've got your system for managing it in place.
Absolutely.
And then have we got one more question? I think we've got one more poll.
One more, yeah. I just launched that. So what might stop you from employing? Some of the things we just talked about, isn't it? That the time to administer and manage the employee. I mean, we're a fairly small business, and we have run apprentices. We just had one in kind of administration team, and that's been fairly successful for us in the past. We haven't done any recently, mainly because we need HR people, and there isn't a HR.
I think where I've worked previously, we've had apprenticeships, not where I did my apprenticeship, later on from that, but and it was a well-established sort of frame that they got going and introduced, and they gave exposure to them across the whole of the business, developing their skills. So I guess to some extent the size of the business will have an impact. Because it is about the resources you need to manage it. But I do think, as I said, you don't need to necessarily have an apprentice now. You can take the time to research and put in place the steps you need to administer it, and then see that it's a potential benefit later down the line, second half of the financial year or something. And see what other employers are doing if they do use apprenticeships. You know, find out if you've got any contacts to see, you know, how they go about it, how they find it. But yeah, the time to administer
is the biggest issue. Yeah, it definitely is. There is a lot of resource needed. Having managed a scheme myself, I know what's needed. It's and that was just for one. But I think the larger you are, you also have more opportunities. You know, you can share it around the experience for the apprentice. Whereas in a smaller organisation, it usually ends up with one manager or one team that's doing all the work, so they do have to have the capacity for that.
Mm.
And we have had a comment, actually, they do offer HR apprenticeship. I think that's probably easier on an internal HR or a large organisation that has an HR team. Because we're a consultancy, we're slightly different, so we can't offer all the experience that an internal HR apprenticeship might need, but I think it's definitely something that's worth looking at. So yeah. And there is somebody asking about, is there a good place to get HR apprentices from? So it might be that we can put people in touch with each other. So we'll get some information and share it with you afterwards. Okay, shall I hide that one and let you, there you go.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's really over to the questions, actually, Sue. So if we have had any questions come through.
Yeah, we've had a couple. So the first one, which is really interesting from my perspective, is somebody asked if the youth training scheme that was around in the 80s was an apprenticeship. I used to manage YTS schemes.
I remember that phrase now.
No, it was a while ago. I'm showing my age now. And I absolutely think it was the early apprenticeships, because we had to have agreements in place, you had to have training agreements, you had to have the tripartite ones with the training provider, the organisation and the individual. They were predominantly aimed at youth, hence the title, but it was definitely the early apprenticeship. Yes, I would agree, and the principles are very much the same. So we've had a comment about somebody says some of their line managers have put off apprenticeships because the quality of the college teaching is poor, even though they're an established provider. And she's, are there any formal evaluation and assessment tools for the course a college might run? I guess if you're doing your skills gap analysis and understanding what skills it is you are trying to plug, and then looking at the providers and whether they are actually providing the training that you need. I have known apprenticeships where clients have been unhappy with the training provider and they have moved. They've been able to switch the apprenticeship to another provider. They've gone elsewhere. So I think, yes, you can shop around. To actually, I think there has to be some kind of analysis of the training course that they are providing and the scheme that you're setting up for your own business. Are those skills being matched? For some apprenticeships, it's really hard. I know I was helping one client try and find stonemasons, and there isn't much training out there apart from one-to-one. You know, we were researching all the local cathedrals that might have schemes and who they used and what kind of training courses they were using for the training element. So it's sometimes you do have to be creative. Sometimes there's not a natural or necessarily a natural training course, and you might have to decide what's the core elements you need, such as the business admin one, which is a common one, isn't it? Which could be the foundation for a lot of roles. So yeah, I think there will be tools you can use, but I guess a lot of it is part of your analysis of what it is you're trying to develop in the role and for the individual.
And also the account that you have to have set up through the government website to manage any apprenticeships. That's where you can find your training providers. You can read feedback and reviews about them. And like I said during the webinar, you can access Ofsted reports and things like that as well. So I think, you know, if you've already got an apprentice provider in place and you're not satisfied, then look perhaps to consider assessing what you need, like what Sue says, and perhaps researching other alternative providers. And by the sounds of it, you can switch apprenticeship schemes to different providers, but obviously check all your terms and conditions.
And I think that's you just have to as many of will know, if you do have to go down the road of terminating an apprenticeship, it's not that easy. So you do have to ensure that the agreements that you use are tight. They're probably more complex than an employment contract, to be fair, because
Yeah.
of the complexities and the restrictions and the around the actual apprenticeships, to protect the individuals really from the kind of, or to ensure they get the benefits that they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a complex area, but yeah, you know, as you
Yeah.
said earlier, we have got templates if you need to talk to us if you're interested,
Yeah.
because we've got quite a lot of collateral for you for that. So we've got, are there set times of the year when you can apply for funding? Do you know that? I don't know.
I don't know that. I don't think there is. I've not, from my research, I've not come across that there's like intake dates, if you like. I don't know.
No, it's one I'll have to look into.
Yeah, one that I'll look into.
And what, somebody was asking what percentages of businesses are only paying apprenticeship wage. I guess that's something we could put out a survey
Yeah, that's
on.
interesting, actually.
But yeah, it's not a statistic I have seen. I don't know whether it's available through the you know, the national statistics.
Yeah, I'll have a
But we
look into
can have a
that.
look at those. So that definitely these questions that we are not too sure on, we will try and look, and we can send out some more information. I've had a couple of people offer some training provider information
Oh,
for
brilliant.
apprenticeships, so we will share that. And so apparently there's the Institute of Apprenticeships has information for each apprenticeship and explains the knowledge, skill and behaviour that will be trained and assessed for an apprentice on that standard.
Yeah,
And they
okay.
will be required to demonstrate at the endpoint assessment to successfully complete. So this will determine if it's the right option in line with the gap analysis. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. If you analyse what it is you're looking, and then make sure that you've reviewed the apprentice, you know, the knowledge, skill and behaviour that is going to be delivered, and that it matches what you're looking for and what the
yeah.
individual is looking for in their development. So yeah, it looks like that information is available.
So the first two steps are really of that flow that I went through are really key. It's making sure you get the right training program and the right training provider that align to your business goals and what your needs are, essentially.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's all the questions I have
Okay,
now. Yeah,
lovely, thank you.
good questions.
And this really, just to bring our webinar to a close, we've got some information just to share with you. So on the slide here, it's all about our HR knowledge base that I mentioned. So it's our online portal for being able to give you access to all our template HR documents that cover the entire employee life cycle. And to accompany those templates, we have the HR articles as well, with some guidance notes, checklists, everything that you could ever think of is on there. And obviously that's our main online portal that is under constant review and updates, and we always add to it each month. So that's our HR knowledge base, and do let us know. We'll run a quick poll at the end shortly as to if there's any other information you'd like from us. We also offer training courses, so as you can see here, there's a whole range of management training courses. The ILM 3 and 5 in particular are now ones that we can run, and then all of our other training courses count towards CPD points. So do let us know if there's any way in which we can help you with training. As you know, we run these webinars on a monthly basis. We're actually running a second one this month at the end, and it's all to do with menopause in the workplace and how we can support your employees. So do join us for that. It's accessed via our website, or if you're a knowledge base user, you can access it through the knowledge base to register. And then next month's main webinar is all about performance management, but not just at one level in the organisation, but throughout the entire organisation structure, and how do you manage performance at all those different levels. So that's going to be on the 15th of Feb. And then we have at the end of March the HR Solutions Virtual Employment Law Seminar. In fact, we've also got an absence management webinar earlier in that month. But the Employment Law Seminar is a real It's an annual event. We've run them for years, and really this year is going to be a big year for employment practices in terms of all the new legislation that's coming in, case rulings we're expecting or have seen in the last few months. So we're going to just take you through all that in a virtual seminar. So it'll be slightly longer than our normal monthly webinars, but do come along to that. It's obviously free, of course, and that's going to be on the 28th. So I did mention a moment ago, if you do want to let us know, if you do want us to let you know rather about our services, whether it's our HR services, health and safety, recruitment, knowledge base, just let us know by participating in the poll, and then we can be in contact with you to follow up.
Okay, I'll close that now. There you
Lovely,
go.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings our webinar to a close. So I just want to thank you, as always, for your time. I know everybody's busy and obviously the start of a new year. So thank you for attending. I hope you've all found it useful. If you do want any further information or help from us, do get in touch. Thank you to Sue and Hannah for obviously supporting in the webinar as well. And we hope to see you next week or next month even. Thank you.
Thank you.